Hey everybody, welcome back to part 5 of 3D drawing. Today we're going to be looking at a technique called transformation. This is a super fun technique where we take some of the skills and knowledge that we already learned in the past several lessons and try to transform our 3D solids into real world objects. So before you can be really good at this, I want to show you a couple of things. I want to show you some examples of things that people have done in the past, and I want to take you onto the interweb and have a look at how to find good images. So let me just set the camera down here and hang on just a sec. You wait right there. I'll be right with you. Yes, here we go. I've got some really cool things to show you from different things that my students have done in the past, so let's check it out. Here's a couple of examples where we saw a circle transform into eyeballs and sushi. We have a TV and a skyscraper seen from above. Here we have somebody doing a character and then a super cool graveyard image. We have a parking garage and an alien spaceship. How about you try a little food? Or maybe a castle, maybe some French toast. A jack-in-the-box, or just an open box. The house from up, or maybe the box of popcorn you ate while you watched the movie. A spaceship, or our solar system. A cake roll, or a pop-up. Basketball, or a character. One thing that all of these drawings had in common was each of these individuals was looking at an image while they were drawing. This is really key for you to be successful at this technique of transformation. We can take these drawings found from online, just a Google image search, and when they are put into a presentation or a document, you can even do things like this to be able to rotate it, to be able to see it better according to the way that you've drawn your solids. Now, these are a couple of examples that you could use for the circle, or we could have a couple of examples maybe that you would use for a cube. But a simple Google search will help you find images that will help you to draw using this technique. When you're doing a Google image search, it might be helpful to reference some keywords such as cartoon or to use the word drawing when you're looking these things up. What it's going to do for you is bring up some simpler images, easier to draw, easier to copy when you're making your drawing. And while you're looking, it might give you some great ideas how to change or add to the idea that you already had. Or maybe you think this is a piece of cake. By looking at images of these cakes, it would help me to transform my triangle into a real-world object. When you've selected the image that you want to try to recreate, keep in mind the things that we already have learned in class. We have learned about how to create connection lines to make these work with our vanishing point, and you should be able to identify at this time things like this, parallel lines that happen in our solids. And when we keep those lines truly parallel to our original shape, it will help us to recreate these drawings. Remember, the sky is the limit. It is only limited by your creativity. And hopefully you really enjoyed seeing some of the drawings that my other students have been able to do. Now it's our turn. I'm going to walk you through a couple of things and teach you some different techniques that you can try with the transformations that you want to do for your drawings. So let's head out to the studio. Hey, so here we are. We're in the space that we're going to be drawing today. I've got a couple of cool tricks to show you. Today, we're going to bend, break, maybe completely eliminate some of the steps that we've worked on before. So we've got to stay incredibly flexible. And keep in mind, I can't show you everything there is to know about transformation. Okay, now let me get to my space here. I've got all my normal tools that I normally need. I've got some paper to work with. I've got pencils and a ruler. These are all the tools that we're going to need for today's work. For my first example, I'm going to show you how we can do things like this. Taking our circle cylinder, transforming it into a sphere, and giving it motion lines behind it. Now, we've done motion lines already in the past, but I'm going to show you some neat tricks on how to change that into looking like lightning or fire or smoke trailing behind an object. As always, we begin with a vanishing point. And then I'm going to draw myself a circle. I've got my circle in place. Now I'm going to move through and begin to get my connection lines in place. Now, when we did motion in a previous lesson, we talked about how we use repeating of step 2, what I did right there, and we're just going to repeat that and repeat that and repeat that. So for today, I'm going to be doing that exact thing. I'm going to draw in some more connection lines. I'm going to put lots and lots of connections through this to help me begin to draw what would appear to be flames coming out of an object. Okay, so I've got some connection lines happening on this. Now this front piece, I want to make it look like a basketball. Remember, looking at the images like we have on here is a really good move for you to make when you're trying to represent real objects. So first I make it look like a baseball, then I'm going to put a line down the middle of it, and then another line down the middle of it. And we have a pretty good representation of a basketball at that point. Now, with all of these lines back here, I want to do a neat trick by adding what appears to be flames. It's not going to look exactly like what it does in this image, but I want to show you how we use the connection lines to transform this movement into another object. Flames are curved lines and points. Okay, so what we're going to be doing is I'm going to be using these connection lines that I have, but along it I'm going to be putting on curves and points and then back in. I'm going to add another one with a curve and a point and back in. Now as I go through this, I'm going to try to make them smaller and smaller and smaller as they go back towards the vanishing point. So we have a curve to a point, a curve to a point, a curve to a point, a curve to a point. Now with these other connection lines that I have here, as well as the other side, I'm going to keep repeating this process. So right on here I'm going to go with a curve to a point, and I'm going to go a curve to a point. I'm going to go a curve to a point. Notice that I've changed the direction, so now I'm going actually the opposite direction that I was before. A curve to a point. And these should start getting really small back here, curve to a point. I'm going to do that again right here, curve to a point. Again, a curve to a point. Now to really make this sell well, I've got some really interesting things happening here, and every single move that I made followed the connection lines. I tried to go from bigger to smaller as it goes back in the distance. Now we can add a little bit more detail here. I'm going to actually draw a little bit of a curve to a point that goes up on top of my basketball. I'm going to do that again right over here. I'm going to have a curve come up over the basketball out to a point. And this little addition, I can do a little bit of erasing and erase some of the basketball that we see through it. And finally, after I've got all this in place, what I'm going to do is erase some of my connections that I was using to help me get my lines in, and then adding some parallels to the flames that I already drew. When we're drawing things like fire, we normally see a repetition of parallels to the curves that we have, and because I have my motion lines in place from the connections that I drew, this tends to be really easy. I just kind of move in with these parallels to make it look even cooler. And so now we have a flaming basketball flying through space right out at us. You could choose any sport that you're into, make it a soccer ball, make it a baseball, make it any kind of sphere object that is floating through space. It could even be a meteor or something like that. Alright, so for our next example, I'm going to go to the square, and I'm going to use an example like this of architecture seen from above. So we can draw a giant skyscraper as we see it from the sky as if we were flying over it. So we're going to start with the basics. We're going to go back to step 1, step 2, step 3. I've got my vanishing point here on the paper. I'm going to draw myself a square right here on the paper using my ruler to get it. And this is going to be the very, very top of my building. Now, most of this that we're going to do on the building, we've done in a previous lesson. After we add the details and things, you'll see that this will feel very familiar to work that we've already done. So I have my square in place, that's step 1. Step 2 says connected to the vanishing point, so let's do that. Let's get our connections going. Step 3 says parallel, and I want to see a super tall building as if it was a skyscraper. So the parallels that I add, I'm going to add them way, way, way down here, very close to the vanishing point. Finish off that edge there, and then take and finish off this edge here right out in front. to see the like steel beams going up the building and windows going all the way throughout the building, we're gonna repeat step 2 and repeat step 3. So I'm gonna begin with my connections, and I'm gonna try to make sure that I'm getting these equally spaced. Now you could measure, you have a ruler hopefully that you're using to make these drawings happen, so you could kind of measure, but I'm just gonna kind of eyeball it. I'm gonna try to make sure that I get this equally spaced. The smaller the details, meaning the more lines that you include right now, the larger your building will look. If you do not have many lines for this step, your building is probably only going to look like it's a 5-10 story building, where if you add tons of lines for this step, it looks like the details are smaller, makes the building look bigger. I'm going to add a few connections on this side as well. Okay, so I've got my connections in place. The next thing that we're going to do is repeat our step 3, which is parallel lines. I'm going to be going parallel to this side of the box as well as this side of the box, and I'm going to try to add tons of parallels, because the more parallels that I add, the smaller the details will look and the bigger my building will look. Now, something else to keep in mind is as we get closer and closer to the vanishing point, it is going to look more authentic and more realistic if you are making the space between your parallels smaller and smaller and smaller as we go. Now when I go to the other side, I just want to meet up where my other connections are, and all of these lines are parallel to the side of the box instead. Okay, so this is decent, but I still don't think it's enough to make it look like a building. What I want to do to it is I want to add a little recessed portion, in other words, like an opening on the top, just a little bit. We're going to push it in just a little bit, and then I'm also going to add a spike on the top, almost like when you go downtown places, you see there's antennas on top, or like these decorative spikes or spires on top of the building, so I want to add both of those things. Now, to make an opening, what I'm going to start with is a box within a box. I'm going to keep this box in really, really close to what I originally drew for my square. And this is going to be like a little ledge on the building. And then from this corner, again, we want to go from the farthest corner from the vanishing point, I'm going to add a connection line. We drop a connection line back right there. Okay, and I only put it just a little bit. Now watch. If I go parallel to this, go straight up and down right here, and then I go parallel to this, go straight across right here, and now it looks like there's a little recessed portion right on the top of the building. Okay, now about the center here, I'm going to add a little circle, and then using my vanishing point, I'm going to create a connection from that circle go up like that, and then I'm going to go back to the other side and bring it back down like this. My circle was a little off center. You'll find that you make these mistakes on occasion yourself, but now I have a spike that is heading way, way up into the sky up above my building, and I can draw my circle a little bit better around it and do a little bit of erasing on the inside. Now, this trick that I just shared with you about drawing things coming out of your solids is a brand new trick. We haven't tried this together, but you can actually do this with any of your solids. You could have anything sort of popping out from it, but this is a connection technique using the dot on the paper and using the connection to go out. And at this point, I'm pretty happy with my building that I've made. All right, everybody, let's try one more. Let's look at what we can do with the triangle. For my particular example, I'm going to use a drawing. I looked up a piece of cake cartoon. And so I'm going to deal with this drawing to try to represent something that I can make. So what we're going to need to start with then is a triangle. I'm going to draw the triangle on my page. Now, because of where this is according to my vanishing point, I'm only going to need to make 2 connections for this one, so let's get into that part there. Let's draw our connections. I'm going to draw my connection lines in lightly because I know that I definitely will not need this whole thing. I'm not going to have a piece of cake that is as tall as the building that I just drew. So I'm going to put my connections in nice and lightly. Now I need a parallel edge Right about there looks like it would be good enough. And then I'm going to go and darken up my connection here, and then we're going to be adding some extra parallel lines to show the different layers of the cake. So my first thing that I'm going to do then is I'm going to match up my ruler to get the parallel edges in, and I'm going to add a layer of cake there. I'm going to go really, really close because I'm going to have this almost like there's frosting in between it there. And then I'm going to do that one more time. Try to keep it evenly spaced throughout. 2 parallel lines there. So now we have these sort of cake layers and then frosting layers happening in between. Now the top of the cake would be frosted. And so what I'm going to do at the top of the cake actually is using the triangle that I started with, but I'm going to make it go a little bit wavy all the way around. I'm just kind of working along the line that I already had, making it a little bit darker, but I'm also giving it just a little bit of a kick to it to show that it's wavy and not perfectly straight. I want to do the same thing on this here because this is also frosting. So I'm going to go through and just kind of make this a little bit wavy in between. None of this needs my ruler. I use the ruler to give me the lines to help me get this started. And now this is looking pretty good. I've got a little bit of waviness to it, but it still has the rigid structure of the original solid that I drew. To represent the texture of the cake is just going to have like these kind of tiny little dots in there. So I'm just going to use my pencil and put tiny little curves in through a lot of it. Some of them are going to be shaded in, and I'm going to try to have some on the edges, some in the middle, and I'm going to do that for every layer of what I have as a representative of my cake layer. On the edges, in the middles. So just this kind of wavy little thing that I'm adding in. Do that on my bottom layer here as well. Try to fill it in, have it evenly throughout. Now, what I really love about this drawing that I have over here is this little drip that's coming down. And in fact, I want to do several drips on mine. I'm going to have drips come down the sides of the cake here. But what I'm going to give myself is very, very lightly in here. I'm going to draw in a connection line. So I'm going to have a little drip right here. I'm going to have another drip right about here. And then I'm going to do one more right out here towards the front, and that one is going to be kind of short. Okay, so I have these place markers where I'm going to have this sort of drip down. At the top of those, I'm going to erase a little bit of the edge of the cake. And then I'm going to take this line that I had on the side of my triangle, and I'm going to bring it down and draw along the edge of this drip, this connection line that I have started. And at the very bottom of it, I'm going to give it like sort of a big drippy part to it, and then bring that all the way back up. We want to erase any kind of details that we had on the inside of that, so that the drip looks like it's coming from the top. This one I'm going to make go a little bit wider, just so that you can see this as a better example. I'm going to erase out some of the things already so that I don't have to do the erasing afterwards. So I start on the top edge, and I'm going to draw a little bit of a wavy line as it comes down, and then have it go out to a big kind of drip right there. Bring it back wavy and back up. One last time right here. This drip I'm going to keep relatively short. I start at the top and we go wavy out to a big bump, almost like a raindrop or a teardrop shape. And now I have frosting floating down the side of my cake. There is normally a little bit of frosting that happens right on this top edge, so I'm going to add a little wavy line in right here. We're going to let that break the boundaries of the original shape a little bit, and I'm going to throw in some more wavy lines in there to show the texture of the frosting. And rather than putting anything on the top, like this one has a strawberry on the top, I think I'm more interested in putting it on a plate. So right down here, actually going out and around what I already have, I'm going to draw myself a kind of a circle. And normally plates have a little bit of a circle inside of a circle, so I'm going to draw that around as well. And maybe I'll add another little hand-drawn detail, and that will be the fork that I will eat this with. So you could pull up an image of a fork to make sure that this goes right for you, but I'm going to get just a little fork on there. So now I have a fork, a plate, and a piece of cake. Okay, folks, that's it today. What I wanted to do was take you on a tour to see how, with specific examples, we can take knowledge that we already know and apply it to adding realism into some of the objects that we have. I hope you had a little bit of fun working on these with me, and I hope you're excited to try some on your own now. Think about the object that you most want to draw. Look up an image on your computer, set it down, get your solid in place, and then begin to add the details. Think about where connection lines might help that to happen. Think about where parallel lines might help that to happen. Pull up an image online, draw the thing that you want to draw, and give me some amazing results. I'll see you next time, folks.